Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 11 deadline decisions. This is a weekly series where I discuss your final questions and dilemmas ahead of the upcoming deadline and also round up the latest press conference and injury updates as well. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, and if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, let's jump into the video and look at those press conference updates as of Friday afternoon at 3 PM. I just wanted to remind you that the deadline for Saturday for Game Week 11 is 2.5 hours later than usual. So there is no early kickoff, which means rather than the deadline being at 11 AM UK time, it's at 1:30 PM UK time. That therefore means the deadline stream will also start 2.5 hours later at 11:30 AM UK time. So if you're in the UK, it means you can have a bit of a lie-in. If you're in a different time zone, just make sure you've worked out what time the deadline is for you. So with all that being said, and make sure you tune into the deadline stream, let's go through the press conference updates as of Friday at 3 PM. I always timestamp that. The reason is at around 4 PM, 5 PM, 6 PM, we often start getting more news from sort of team training and little quotes that are coming out. So do bear in mind that this is only as of Friday at 3 PM. I will update you on the deadline stream tomorrow if we get any additional news. Let's start with the big one, which is Cole Palmer. So Maresca said, Cole is getting better, but because he can walk and have dinner doesn't mean he is completely fit. He is getting better, and we still have 2 days to prepare for the game. Hopefully, we can have him for a session, at least on Saturday, and then we take a decision. Just so you know, this was an embargoed quote, which means it happened on Thursday night, but this quote wasn't released until 1 PM on Friday. So it's not a quote from Friday, it's a quote after their European game in which they won 8-0, by the way, which is crazy. So Chelsea then reported this on their website as saying Maresca is hopeful that Cole Palmer will train on Friday or Saturday. And when you look at this and then with that context say, yeah, I think that's what he's saying here. We hope we can have him for a session on one of the 2 days, Friday or Saturday, at the very least on Saturday. So I think this is a largely positive update. I already thought that even if Cole Palmer was ruled out for a game, I would have advised holding him because from 12 and beyond, he's the best captain, probably in 12, 13 and 14. But at the very least, I think he could be the best captain in 12 against Leicester away and then 14 against Southampton away. So I would have wanted to hold Palmer even if he was out. But the fact that there's a good chance of him being available, I just can't justify selling Cole Palmer. Now, if you brought him in and you've got no money tied up, you've got lots of free transfers, and you want to attack this week with a player with a better fixture that you know is going to be available, let's say Heung-min Son or Bruno Fernandes, then by all means go for it. Or if he's your only route to Salah and you just want to take the risk, go for it. But for me, I don't see the justification to sell Cole Palmer. So I would definitely be keeping based on this information. Let's see if on Friday we do get any information about whether he did train or not, and I think that will help us a lot. But largely positive. On the Spurs, Moore, Werner, Richarlison and Odegaard are all out for Game Week 11. That is obviously fantastic news if you own Son, Solanke or Johnson, because the three of them should get extremely good minutes. Obviously, Kulusevski's in there as well. Kulusevski just plays every available minute pretty much. I will just note, and we'll maybe discuss this when we look at captaincy in a second, I think Maddison could be on the bench again because they seem to line up better when they've got two of Basuma Sarr or Bentancur playing. If Maddison does start on the bench and he comes on, he could come on for any of these players. Because if he comes on for Solanke, Son goes to the 9, Kulusevski goes to the wing. If he comes on for Son, again, Kulusevski goes to the wing, Maddison's in the 10 role. So Maddison could come on for any of these players. If he comes on for Johnson, again, Kulusevski goes out to the right. So if Maddison starts, then I don't really see many players that can come on for them in the attacking roles. But if he's on the bench, which I think is more likely, then I do think we could see a position where any of these could still get like 60 minutes. But what it probably means is that two of them are probably going to get close to, if not 90 minutes. So it is really good news if you own Son, Solanke, Johnson. If you were looking to captain them, they are more likely to get better minutes now. And Romero apparently might come back in, which would obviously be a big boost because Van de Ven is out. Hopefully that's all good for Spurs. On Brighton, João Pedro has been back in training for a week now and has a big chance of returning against Manchester City. Not returning, featuring. Was that a Freudian slip? Is he going to return? He's going to get a goal? I think that João Pedro will be back in our thinking very soon. I think he's down to 5.4 million now. He's such a good asset when he plays. The data's great. The minutes, remember how good the minutes were before the injury, by the way. I know Welbeck's minutes have been as good, if not better, but João Pedro was getting very, very good minutes. In fact, there were some games where Welbeck was coming off a bit early and João Pedro was being pushed to the 9. I'm not saying this makes Welbeck a bad option, by the way. I still love him, but João Pedro at that cheaper price, I'm very interested. Lewis Dunk and Yankuba Minte do remain doubtful, however. So if you've got Dunk, I'd still probably keep him because from 12 and beyond, the fixtures are good. You probably didn't want to start him against Man City anyway. So yeah, really good news on João Pedro. If he can stay fit and get back to full fitness soon, I'll be very interested. Diogo Jota won't return until 1 or 2 weeks after the international break. If you've got Darwin or you want to go there might be some temptation. We saw, I think Luis Diaz started through the centre actually. And did he get a hat-trick? Got 2 or 3 goals against Bayer Leverkusen. So Luis Diaz could be a really good shout if he starts. I do just wonder, though, could we see Darwin as the 9 and Gakpo off the left again? It's just, I don't want to go for Liverpool assets that aren't Salah. Konate obviously returned in the UCL, kept the clean sheet, played for 88 minutes. Looks very good if you've got Konate or if you wanted to move for him. The injury to his hand and wrist wasn't serious and he at least played midweek. On Newcastle, Eddie Howe confirmed the weekend comes too soon for Callum Wilson and Kieran Trippier. So if you wanted to take a punt on Lewis Hall, who for me is one of the best defenders to bring in at the moment, I've spoken to a lot of Newcastle fans now. They think even if Trippier's back, Lewis Hall is nailed on as the left back for Newcastle. So I really like him at 4.3 million. And obviously if you're looking to bring in Isak or Gordon, Callum Wilson's still not available. So there's less chance of there being a little bit of rotation there. On Manchester United, this quote was from Thursday, but Ruud said Ahmad was subbed off with what looked like a bit of a knock, and he said he's being checked now. I hope it's not a big injury, of course, because he did very well. I've not yet seen an update from the Friday, but I think if he's fit and available, he's got to start, which would be bad news for Garnacho, because I think Rashford will start on the left. If Ahmad isn't available, then yeah, we probably do see Garnacho and Rashford start. I wouldn't be bringing in Garnacho this week. As risky as that is to say, because he has been very attacking, his decision-making's not been good, his finishing's been pretty poor, and I just don't know if he starts this game. So for those reasons, again, I'd probably just avoid the United attackers that aren't Højlund or Bruno. And even a Højlund, I suppose, is a small risk with Xerxes. So it really is Bruno Fernandes or no one for me. Shaw and Euro are both back in team training as well. Shaw won't be rushed back. He definitely won't be playing this week. And I don't think Euro will either. In the long term, though, and we're going to discuss Manchester United later in the video, if Shaw can get back to full fitness, he will be the starting left back or left wing back for Amorim. Whichever formation he plays, Luke Shaw will be starting, which leaves only one position available for Mazraoui or Dalot, assuming that neither of them plays the right centre back. That probably does enough to put me off Mazraoui and Dalot in the long term. But in the short term, like if you've already got them or you want to just attack the next 3, I would be surprised if they don't both start the next few games. So I think you're probably safe for the next 3 against Leicester, Ipswich, Everton. But beyond that, we just need to see how Amorim lines up and who he prefers. And nobody knows that. Even Amorim himself probably doesn't know that yet. He probably needs to see them in training. So on Man United, if you're looking for a defender, it's probably De Ligt. It's probably the safest at the moment. And if you're looking for an attacker, it has to be Bruno Fernandes for me. On Arsenal, no surprise. Absolutely nothing from Arteta. He's basically admitted he's never going to give us team news ever again. And even if he does, we don't know how accurate it is. Like if he come out and said, you know what, Havertz is absolutely fine, I'd still be like, is he? Because I don't trust him. So we're just not going to get anything reliable from Arteta. And even if we do, we don't trust it. But there was no clear update on Havertz, Rice or Marino. It was apparently a nasty cut for Havertz. So as long as it was stitched up and has healed enough, you would imagine that the nasty cut probably doesn't keep Havertz out. And on Rice, he's been called up for the England squad, although there are other players, such as Jack Grealish, who was also called up for the England squad, that apparently isn't fit and available. So maybe don't read into that too much. I would expect all 3 of these to be available. I think Marino was taken off due to like illness and not feeling well. So yeah, my prediction is Havertz, Rice and Marino are all available, but you just never know with Arteta. And Ødegaard, we would expect to be in the squad. As to whether he's fit enough to start, we don't know. He played 1 minute against Inter Milan midweek. That was coming on for Havertz. So 1 minute isn't building up the fitness. But the fact that he came onto the pitch, that's a good sign, right? Because there was only a couple of minutes left. You wouldn't bring on someone that isn't quite fully fit. You wouldn't risk that. So that tells me that Ødegaard is available to play. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him get 60, 65 minutes. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he gets one more game on the bench just to build up that match fitness. On Everton, Dwight McNeil is flagged with apparently the same knee injury that he had that made him a doubt for the previous game week against Southampton. There is a couple of articles going around that have suggested that he might have re-aggravated the injury and he might be a doubt, but there was no mention of him in the press conference, at least in the open public part from Sean Dyche. So sadly, I don't have an update for you. It's one of those where hopefully we get either a leak. There are a couple of accounts on Twitter or X, and I'll retweet them if I see them, that give information on Everton, so maybe that will help. Or we just wait for training pictures and hope that McNeil is in those. But as of right now, I know he's flagged in FPL, but there was no mention of that injury by Sean Dyche, which is usually a good sign that no one has brought that up. On Crystal Palace, Just wanted to say they are absolutely ravaged with injuries, especially in the attacks. They're going to be without Nketiah, Eze, Wharton, and also Lerma for Game Week 11. That is good news if you own any Fulham assets, because they are just a little bit weak in their team. So maybe the likes of, hopefully, Raul Jimenez and also Robinson might do quite well this week. So yeah, those are the key press conference updates as of Friday at 3 p.m. Anything further, I'll update on the deadline stream, which again will be 2.5 hours later than usual. And let me know if any of this news affects you too much. And let me know what you're doing with Cole Palmer as well. So guys, let's discuss Game Week 11 captaincy. And I'd love to know down below in the comments who you are captaining. And for some of you, it might be as simple as you own one of Salah or Haaland. You want to continue to trust the premium in your team, so you captain whichever one you own. But for some other people, you might own both, or neither, or just think, I do own one, but I'm not necessarily backing them that much for captaincy, because if we look at the fixtures, they are, amongst our teams, not the strongest. So there is always the opportunity when they don't have the best fixture in that week to potentially go against them. So, as always, what I've got is the top captaincy options for me this week, which is Salah, Haaland, Son, Solanke, Cunha, Johnson, and Fernandes. And I've got their non-penalty expected goals per 90 this season, their non-penalty expected assists per 90 this season, the opponent XGC rank, so it gives us a bit of an idea about the defensive data of the team they're playing against. 20th would mean they're the worst defense in the league. First would mean they're the best. We've then got the bookies percentage chance of one single goal in that game. And then I've ordered the table by projected points according to Fantasy Football Hub. And if you still want to get that 7-day free trial and 30% off, there is a link down below in the description where you can get all of this data and much more. So, if we're going based off the Fantasy Football Hub projections, Salah is the best captain this week, followed by Haaland, followed by Son. And if I was just going at very surface level and I wasn't really engaging with FPL, I'd probably just look at it and say, yeah, based on what I'm seeing right now, Salah is better than Haaland. Haaland's not performing well. And Son, due to the fixture, is a seriously good option, especially given that we think his minutes might improve this week and he's probably on penalties too. The issue we've got with Spurs is I think that Son, on his day, is a better captaincy option than Solanke and Johnson. The data's not been great this season from a goal threat perspective, right? 0.28 non-penalty expected goals is not particularly good for Son. But because his minutes are probably going to be lower than Solanke and Johnson, it does pull into question whether it's worth going for Son. Like, is it worth risking a player that has just come back from injury? And when he does, he got 55 minutes. Is he going to get enough minutes to justify picking him over Salah, Haaland, but also his teammates as well? The good thing for Son, as we spoke about in the previous section, is due to the injuries that they have in the attack, Son could get much, much better minutes than he maybe would have been if they had everyone fit. That being said, let's say Maddison doesn't start and they play Kulusevski in the 10 and then Solanke, Johnson and Son. You could see Maddison come on in the 60th minute for Son, push Kulusevski out to the right wing, Johnson goes out to the left and Maddison goes into the 10. So just because they don't have loads of players available doesn't necessarily mean that Son gets more than 55 to 60. I think what it comes down to is if you think Son gets, let's say 75 minutes plus, I would put him right into the conversation for captaincy, because Ipswich are, as you can see here, the worst defence in the league, quite comfortably, I would say as well. Like, they're conceding goals for fun, and Spurs are the best attack in the league, and Son is their talisman on penalties, who's an exceptionally good finisher, and he's got some creativity too. Like, on paper, Son should be the best captain, but it all comes down to the minutes. I don't feel comfortable enough projecting that Son will get 75 plus, and so for that reason, if I own Son, I'd be very happy to own him, but I wouldn't feel quite comfortable giving him the armband. So if you are looking at Spurs, it probably is Solanke or Johnson for me. And I hate saying this as someone that sold Solanke last week, and it is very knee-jerk, because only last week he'd had 3 shots in 4 games, in which he'd played 90 minutes in pretty much all of them. He just wasn't even shooting. But when you do look at the underlying data, and assuming that he does continue to now shoot, because he then got a goal in Europe as well, he's got 0.66 non-penalty expected goals per 90, which is actually the second best on this list. Like, it's much better than Salah, Son, Cunha. It's better than Johnson, Fernandes. Like, it's very, very good data. Like I said, Ipswich are the worst defence. Ipswich also usually concede goals to the number 9 of the opposing team. We've seen that throughout the season. And if you look at the bookies' percentage chance of a goal, he's joint second with Salah. So if you're looking to captain a Spurs player, it probably is Solanke. And do I dislike this as a captaincy option? No. Again, with the injury to Richarlison, Solanke's likely to play 90 minutes, or at least is much more likely to play 90 minutes. He's obviously found his shooting boots. He's now got 3 goals in 2 games. One of those he came off the bench. Listen, I'm gutted that I sold him now, because I think the decision to sell Solanke was fine. Again, 3 shots in 4 games. going up against an Aston Villa team, which defensively, they never really keep clean sheets, but they also don't usually concede too many chances. And for the first 70 minutes, it felt like a good decision. Solanke had a couple of shots, but nothing very clear-cut. And then that final 20 minutes, he goes absolutely nuclear, and now it feels like a mistake. So if you sold Solanke, I feel like there was justification to do so, but now it feels pretty tough because he's just come off a 16-pointer, and I genuinely think I'd have Solanke up there as one of the better captaincy shouts. Just to tick off some of the other options before we then talk Salah versus Haaland, Cunha is fine. In fact, Cunha is brilliant. He's a great asset to bring in. He's my favourite striker to own at the moment if you're looking at price included. Like value altogether, Cunha is great. And he's playing against Southampton, who are 19th for expected goals conceded this season, right? So they're one of the worst defences in the league. It's at home. He's got goal threat. He's got assist threat. He's on penalties. He's on corners. His minutes are good. Cunha is just so great. But would I prefer to captain Cunha to Solanke, Haaland or Salah? I just don't think I would, because when you look at that goal threat, he's got the worst non-penalty expected goals per 90 on this list. Yes, he's very creative, which is great, but I feel like I need to see a little bit more goal threat from him in the coming games to trust him with the captaincy armband. So I think just owning Cunha is probably enough for me. And then on Fernandes, I do quite like this, right? Because he's on penalties, he's always got good minutes. And in the games since Ten Hag has left under Ruud, he's looked a lot better and he's looked a lot more attacking. But do remember that he scored a penalty in the league, right? If he hadn't scored that penalty, we'd be looking at it again and saying, well, look, he's missed more chances. He just continues to disappoint. So what has changed? I guess he is slightly more, like I said, attacking without Ten Hag in charge, but I'm not sure I've seen enough right now to trust him with the armband. Again, it feels like Fernandes would just be a player I'm happy owning. So that's how I feel there. Out of all of the other options outside of Salah and Haaland, I do think Solanke is probably the standout for me, but I also do like Son, if you project his minutes as being good enough, which then leaves us with Salah and Haaland. I'll say what I said last week, which was when we talked about captaincy. Haaland's data is unbelievable. He has over double the non-penalty XG of Salah. 0.87 for Haaland, 0.41 for Salah. Salah's creativity is good, by the way. It's not that good, though. Cunha's got more, Son's got more, Fernandes has more. So he's definitely more creative than 3 or 4 years ago, Salah, but his creativity hasn't seemed to hit the heights of what we saw even at points last season. The other issue that we've got with Salah and kind of Haaland, they're not easy games. Villa are 5th for expected goals conceded this season. And I know people don't like expected data, and you just say, well, Villa aren't keeping clean sheets. And this is true. They find a way to concede. They're a bit like Man City in that respect. But they're not usually, and I know Spurs turned them over at the end of that game, they're not usually pushovers. They don't usually concede multiple goals. They have done, of course. We've seen that at points. But I guess what I'm saying is Villa isn't an easy fixture, even if it is at home for Salah. That being said, he is joint second, like I said, for the percentage chance of a goal. Fantasy Football Hub have him projected top. He's so good for bonus points. He does have that creativity. He is on penalties. His minutes are good. And he is a good finisher as well. And he does just find ways to score goals, especially late on in games. So Salah is, of course, right up there as one of the best options, if not the best. Haaland has a slightly easier game on paper in terms of the opponent's data. Brighton are about 10th for expected goals conceded. Well, they are 10th for expected goals conceded. It is away, and we know that traditionally players and Haaland himself tends to be a little bit stronger at home. But Haaland's away data was really good last season, and it's not bad this season either. So I wouldn't buy too much into the home versus away for Erling Haaland. And again, if you look at bookies' odds, and there's no surprise here, he has the highest chance of scoring in Game Week 11. I genuinely think, right, so if I was to sum this up, I think the best two options, sadly, are Salah and Haaland. I would have them just about clear at the top. As to who you go for, I think this is a 50-50 decision. I think this is significantly closer than Game Week 10. In Game Week 10, I just went, do you know what? I see the Brighton game at home. I like that for Salah. And I just thought that Bournemouth away game could be tricky for Haaland, which is why I felt comfortable giving Salah the armband. This week, I think it's so much closer. So I'm 50-50. If you were to push me right now, I would just about lean Salah due to form. Whatever you want to call that, Salah is just clearly in form, and Haaland can't find his shooting boots. He missed a penalty in Europe, and he's not quite there. But that could change very quickly. Form only lasts so long. Haaland was in form for the first 5 games, and now he's been out of form for the 5 after that. Who is to say that he doesn't now go on a run of 5 games where he's back in form? And especially if Kevin De Bruyne is in the team, that could be a major advantage. So anyway, I think it's very close, but I would just lean Salah. And then I would have Solanke in 3rd place, Son in 4th place. So there we go. Salah, Haaland, Solanke, Son. Let me know who you're captaining. I will be choosing between Salah and Haaland because I don't have a Spurs asset. And I am marginally leaning Salah at the moment. So guys, you'll hear me sometimes talk about bookies odds and player projections from the market, and I think it is quite useful because these people, it's their full-time job. There's a lot of money at stake. So a lot goes into this. It's not just looking at data. It's not just looking at eye test. It's looking at players' minutes, form, weather. Like so many things go into these projections. And there is an account on Twitter or X called @RobTFPL. Please go follow him. He creates these lovely graphs and graphics, and I'm using it courtesy of RobTFPL. This data is from SpreadX, and it just gives us a bit of an idea about who the bookies are backing to score goals in a given game week. So, as we said, Haaland is top, and then it is Solanke and Salah. So the three of them very, very high up, closely followed by Son. That is... I'm not just copying the bookies odds, but that's why, again, I think they are probably four of the best captaincy options this week. Interesting, and this is assuming that every player starts, by the way. Darwin is actually quite high up as well against Aston Villa at home. And I guess if you think Salah does well, there's a good chance Darwin's involved. It looks like he'll probably start again. The United assets are quite high up as well, and that is mainly given the fixture, right? Højlund, Fernandes, and Garnacho all quite high. I don't know if Garnacho definitely starts. It will depend on Ahmad's fitness. I feel like if Ahmad's fit, we could see Rashford, Ahmad, and Højlund with Garnacho on the bench. Garnacho probably has been the weakest of the wingers that we've had starting in recent weeks. Ahmad and Rashford have probably looked a little bit stronger overall. So, yeah, I think Højlund and Fernandes are two really good shouts this week. I definitely expect both to start, and I think they'll both do quite well. Isak, right up there. Despite Forest being very good defensively, you probably would expect Newcastle to score at least one goal in this game, and Isak's data in recent weeks has been so strong. Jared Bowen is towards the top. There are rumours circulating that Jared Bowen could be out. If you own him, I'm not going to present it in too much detail because it's only very, very vague rumours, but just keep an eye on that on Friday. But if he is playing, Everton at home for the West Ham talisman, it is a really nice fixture. Other players that are decently high up, we've got Chris Wood, Johnson, Brian Mbeumo. Cole Palmer still relatively high up, even though it's a difficult fixture. Strand Larsen, interestingly, is backed by the bookies most weeks ahead of Cunha. Rob did explain this. Apparently, since Sarabia has become available, it's dropped Cunha's projected goals slightly because they assume that Sarabia could take penalties. Two things. I don't know for sure that Sarabia does take penalties, and also I don't think Sarabia will start based on his performance against Crystal Palace. But Strand Larsen does tend to be just favoured in terms of goal threat ahead of Cunha. An important note when you're looking at this is goals, not assists. So someone like Salah, he's 4% lower than Haaland in terms of projected to get one goal, like the percentage chance. But then when you add in the assist threat and the extra point in FPL that they get for a goal and a clean sheet, it probably makes Salah a slightly better option, for example. So there we go. Feel free to pause this, have a look at it. Feel free to go and follow Rob over on Twitter or X. I just find these really, really useful. And I'm like sense checking myself. Just every week, I'm just like, yeah, am I roughly in line with what the market's predictable happening? It doesn't matter if you're not, by the way, but it can also be useful as a bit of a confirmation bias as well. Something you should look at is also the percentage chance of 2 goals. It's always quite unlikely. So you're never expecting really, unless it's a very easy fixture, multiple goals from your player. You've just got to hope that variance is on your side and you get a little bit lucky. So a question that I had, and a couple of people were asking questions around this topic, is like, what is the additional value of rolling a transfer given the international break between game week 11 and 12? Should we attack this week or wait and hold for the break? I am kind of debating something similar myself, but I do almost feel, and I say this as someone that does often like bring it up in videos, I do feel like sometimes we overvalue the importance of having transfers coming out of an international break. So if you've not yet seen, there is an international break between game week 11 and 12. And sometimes, and I would say it is quite rare, in an international break, like 3 or 4 of your players can pick up little knocks and injuries that you might want to deal with. So I would always say, if you can come out of an international break going into the next game week with at least 2 free transfers, it does tend to be quite valuable. So I will accept that. But I'm not necessarily sure that I would give up points this week just to save a transfer. If you're like 50-50 between a decision, and you're like, do you know what? I'm not necessarily sure that my transfer this week does massively benefit me. It's a bit of a risk. Then maybe you do hold. Like for me, I'm tempted, do I sell Rico Lewis or do I keep him? I'm not sure there are that many defenders that I'm like, the upside is that much higher that I am tempted to say, yeah, do you know what? I might roll this week, save the free transfer, and then I could still make a move to sell him in game week 12, but I have a bit more information. So yes, I would absolutely accept that if possible, it is nice, but I would not sacrifice a move that you think would massively benefit your team this week just to have 2 free transfers or 3 free transfers post-international break. The other thing that I would say is, ignore the international break. 2 free transfers is all or more. In this case, could be 3 or 4 or 5 now. But it's always more useful because then you can start looking at combinations. And for me, this is more important than the international break comment. if you've got 2 free transfers, you can immediately downgrade a player to upgrade elsewhere. And that just gives you infinitely more options in your team. As soon as you're looking at 2 transfer combinations, you can do so much more. So let's say my team this week, I looked at the possibility of doing, and I might still do it, Rico Lewis to Matthias de Ligt. But that would be using all of my available money. I then looked ahead to 12, and I thought there is a chance that I want to do Raul Jimenez to Welbeck in game week 12. If I lock up the funds this week, not only have I locked up those funds, but I've then also lost a free transfer, which doesn't offer me the opportunity to downgrade another player and then upgrade Raul Jimenez. So to put that all together, I think if you're making a transfer this week and it's only your 1 free transfer and you're not that convinced by it, yeah, I probably would just hold, maybe play a slightly suboptimal player this week and give yourself more options next week. But that isn't just because of the international break. It's also because of the transfer combinations that it opens up. Let me know how many transfers you plan on going in post-international break into game week 12 with. I'm hoping that I could go into game week 12 with 2, which just offers some decent possibilities. So we had a slightly different but similar question here, which is how different does a game week 11 wildcard look to a game week 12 wildcard? And is it worth going early to chase the potential upside? So in terms of how different will a game week 11 to 12 wildcard look, I actually think relatively different. I've put some players on your screen. In game week 11, Spurs have Ipswich, and in game week 12, they have City. So I feel like if you were wildcarding this week, it'd be very difficult to wildcard a team without any Spurs assets. But you don't really then... No, I wouldn't mind holding like 1 Spurs asset through beyond game week 12, but I wouldn't be then wanting to go into game week 12 with 2 or 3. Whereas if you I would say if you wildcard in game week 12, you might have a Brennan Johnson or a Porro in there, but you're very unlikely to have more than 1 Spurs asset. On Brighton, they've got Man City this week. Yes, you could load up this week, but I'd say if you're wildcarding this week, it'd be very difficult to put 3 Brighton in. Whereas from next week, I could foresee you wanting one of Welbeck or João Pedro, maybe a Lewis Dunk in there, and maybe you do look at a midfielder or a Verbruggen to go there as well. And then Chelsea and Arsenal, they play against each other this week, but from 12, I would definitely want at least 2 Arsenal assets. And I would be looking at PALMER plus one of a Jackson or a Colwill, Reece James Sanchez, something like that. So yeah, I actually think, even ignoring the international break, there is a lot that could look different between game week 11 and 12. The other thing to note is you just don't know what will look different. So let me use the example of when I wildcarded in game week 7. Everyone wildcarded in game week 6. No one had Cole Palmer. And then by game week 7, everyone wanted Palmer in the team. And because I just offset my wildcard by 1 week, I was able to get Cole Palmer in. I also, because I offset it by 1 week, I could have 8 Nuri and Cunha. I've not made many good decisions in FPL this season, but going in game week 7, delaying it by a week, allowed me to hold Salah for an extra week, and he banged and Haaland blanked or got 1 return. And then in game week 7, it allowed me to get 8 Nuri, Cunha, and Palmer, who are 3 assets that a lot of people have had to use transfers to bring in now. So you just don't know what might change week by week. So even if you look at your 11 and 12 wildcard and there isn't that much different, offsetting by 1 week can be quite useful. We do as well chuck in the international break. That will make an impact on maybe some players that you might pick or not. And then the final thing is, I don't know that there is that much upside this week. Like, what is the upside of wildcarding this week? Unless you're bringing in Wolves assets and United assets, there may be, because you can hold them for a little bit longer term, especially those Wolves assets. So maybe if you're looking at your team this week and it absolutely stinks, go for it. My only concern is normally going a week early, one of the major benefits is gaining team value. So I wildcarded in game week 7. I think it went quite well. I lost 1.1 million wildcarding in 7 rather than 6 in team value. It was a massive loss for me, because obviously loads of transfers and price changes happened the week before. If you've still not activated the wildcard and you're watching this on Friday or Saturday, you've lost the entire week of price changes that you could have gained. And so I feel like you've almost lost a lot of the value of wildcarding. So I guess what I'm saying is, unless your team is an absolute disaster, I much prefer wildcarding game week 12. I feel like that is when the fixture swing is very clear. So unless your team's a disaster or you've already activated it, I would delay until game week 12. If you are playing it this week, I'm not going to go through a draft right now, but all I would say is just think about the long term too. I wouldn't have triple Spurs because I don't think you want to hold that in the long term. I would be considering assets from Chelsea, Brighton, Arsenal, even though they don't have a great fixture this week because you'll want them from 12 and beyond. I would be loading up on Wolves and Brentford, who have some decent fixtures. Sorry, Wolves and Bournemouth, who have some decent fixtures coming up. So yeah, you don't want to lose out too much this week if you're wildcarding, but you also don't want to be losing out from game week 12 and beyond. Hopefully that's helpful. Let me know if anyone's playing the chip this week. So guys, believe it or not, I actually received a few questions, and quite a few actually, throughout the week around Manchester United and how they're going to line up under Amorim. And I will just caveat this section by saying I am a United fan, so I've probably looked into it in slightly more detail than others, but no one's got a clue. Would I be massively surprised if Amorim says we don't really have the personnel for a 3-4-3 yet, we're going to play a 4 at the back? I mean, I would be slightly surprised because he's been so successful with this 3-4-3, but also he apparently is quite an adaptive, dynamic manager, willing to change tactics and be quite flexible. And so, no, I guess it wouldn't be a massive shock if we do line up in a 4 at the back at first. But my opinion is that he comes in and sticks to what has been so successful for him, which is this 3-4-3 formation. So let me just explain it very briefly, and then the players that it might benefit. This is how I think we could line up. Obviously, the player at the top is the player that I think will start in that position at the moment. And then the player just underneath is the one that will be maybe like a substitute rotation player. So it is a 3-4-3. Goalkeeper will be Onana. The back three, the centre-back obviously needs to do a lot of passing, but also needs to be quite dominant. I feel like needs to be a good box defender as well. That is what Matthias de Ligt is. So I would be very surprised if we don't see de Ligt as the central centre-back, with probably Harry Maguire as backup. The right centre-back and the left centre-back, they need to be quite dynamic. They need to be quite fast. They need to be quite good on the ball as well. And they need to be quite good at passing into the midfield. So I feel like Lissandro and Euro just suit those roles very well. They're both quite, again, dynamic centre-backs. They've both got a little bit about them. I'm not saying Martinez is the quickest we've seen before, but I just feel like those roles suit the two of them very well. I don't think there'll be that much competition, but I do think that Lindelof, believe it or not, could suit that role quite well if Euro takes a little bit longer. He's back in training, but he might not be back straight away. So I could see us line up maybe for game week 12 against Ipswich with Martinez, de Ligt, and Lindelof as the back three. The wing-backs is where we're just really not sure. I made this graphic a few hours before we got the news that Luke Shaw's back in training. I think in an ideal world, Luke Shaw is the perfect left wing-back in this system. So if Luke Shaw can stay fit, Luke Shaw will be left wing-back, which leaves one position for both Mazraoui and Dalot. Now, if Luke Shaw can't stay fit, or he just doesn't adapt to the system, I do think, as I've put here, we could see a situation where it's probably Dalot as left wing-back, because I think his left foot is slightly better than Mazraoui's, and Mazraoui is right wing back, or vice versa. But as of right now, without Luke Shaw being fully fit, and probably for probably for Ipswich in 12, I think it will be Dalot and Mazraoui. In terms of who I think suits this system better, I think Dalot is a marginally better wing back because I think he's got more of that ability to bomb up and down the wing, whereas Mazraoui tends to pick up pockets quite well. He's more of not necessarily just inverted, but where he performs a lot of his great work is in close quarters, popping off little passes. I don't see him as much going up and down the wing. So I think Mazraoui is a better fullback than Dalot, but I think in a wing-back role, Dalot might be preferred. So my guess at the moment is that once Shaw's back, it'll be Shaw left wing-back, Dalot right wing-back. But even if Dalot is preferred to Mazraoui, there's just going to be a little bit of rotation for all of them. So in the long term, not in the short term, for the next three, I think Dalot and Mazraoui start all of them. But in the longer term, I'm just not so convinced about any of those wing-backs and bringing them in. So if you're looking for a defender at the moment, probably your safest bet is Martinez or de Ligt. But Martinez doesn't carry any attacking threat, so maybe de Ligt might be the best the best defender to bring in from Man United. In terms of the midfielders, it will probably be Kobbie Mainoo and Ugarte. If Mainoo's available for Ipswich, if he's not, I think we'll probably see Eriksen or Casemiro in that role. I still don't think Fernandes is going to play that deep role. I think he's too good in an attacking role. But we could see a situation where Fernandes does partner Ugarte. What you need is very, very energetic midfielders. You're only playing two midfielders here. And because of how wide Mazraoui and Dalot are going to be, or the wing-backs, there's not going to be that same level of support for the midfielders. So you need two midfielders that cover a lot of distance. So Ugarte will be perfect. In terms of the other one, I think Mainoo can do the job, but he's going to need a little bit of support as well. This system doesn't really suit Casemiro or Eriksen massively because they just don't really have the legs. In terms of that front three, like I said, Højlund will be the number 9 for me with Xerxes as backup. I think it's going to suit him very, very well, this team and this role under Amorim. We've seen that for, I think it's Gyökeres at Sporting. I'm not going to say the same profile, but they have similar attributes. And I could see Højlund doing quite well. Højlund is a little bit raw, though. So I wouldn't be surprised if we do see him rotated with Xerxes a little bit. I think Fernandes will play on the, let's call it a right wing, but it's more as like a number 10 inverted forward, number 10, wide 10, whatever you want to call it. It's not a traditional winger. The wing backs are the ones that hold the width under Amorim. So Fernandes will drift in a little bit. It's why I think Ahmad will be excellent at that role if we choose to put Fernandes on the left. So I could see a situation where it's Ahmad is the one that plays off the wide right and comes inside on his left. Same with Anthony as well, by the way. I could see Anthony doing that role. Which means that on the left-hand side, if it is Fernandes at first that's preferred, it will be one of Rashford or Garnacho. I just think Amorim will prefer Rashford. Garnacho's decision-making has been so erratic in the last few games, and Amorim would have been watching that. I've seen a few people suggest that Garnacho could be played at left wing-back. I don't see it. I don't think he's good enough defensively. I don't think his work rate is there either. I think Anthony, if one of them is going to play left wing-back, it would be Anthony, because he's actually very, very underrated from a defensive perspective. It's about all he's done well, but he does track back very well. And also he's left-footed as well, which is good for holding width. I don't think that will happen, though. I think we'd see a Mas or Shaw or Malacia or Dallo or Mazraoui play left wing-back instead. You could disagree with a lot of this, by the way. I could have got loads of that wrong. I've done my research. I know what Amorim does. But in terms of his exact execution of that, I don't watch a lot of sporting. So I don't know if this is exactly what will happen. Again, this could all be worthless because he could just come in and play a 4 at the back and just switch it up. But this is roughly what I'm expecting. I do think in January, we'll see him go for a left back. I could see that. Or maybe in the summer, it'll be instead. And he probably needs a slightly better left winger that plays his role in this system a little bit better. So there we go. Let me know if you disagree or agree with any of that. But in terms of FPL, De Ligt is probably your safest bet that also carries some goal threats. He's very good from set pieces. Mazraoui and Dallo, you could take a risk. Over the next 3, I expect them to start all of them. But in the longer term, if it's not a short-term pick, I just don't know. If Shaw can stay fit, I can't see them obviously both starting. And then Fernandes, maybe Højlund would be the only attackers. I do think Fernandes will do very, very well under Amorim. So guys, just to finish up the video, this is what I'm currently planning with my team, and it's probably roll. I think I'm starting to talk myself out of making a transfer, but just to talk you through it, I am still really happy with the setup, right? Palmer, Salah, Haaland, long term, I think are the 3 best premiums to own. They are very expensive, so most people either won't be able to squeeze them in, or if they do, it will be really at the expense of overall team structure, which I know I'm starting Rodgers most weeks, but other than that, I don't feel like the overall structure has been compromised too much. My team value has improved to a point now, it's not perfect, where I can afford the 3 of them in a relatively balanced team. So in terms of the overall structure, I'm happy, and most of the players in the long term I'm happy with. Sanchez in goal from 12, I'm really happy with. Gabriel, 8 Nuri. Mbeumo, Palmer, Salah, and Rodgers. All 4 of them are great in the long term. Cunha and Haaland, very happy to keep for now. Haaland could be sold. And Raul Jimenez, he was disappointing last week. I'm slightly worried about his minutes, but in the lead up to that, he's got a lot of goals and his minutes have been pretty good. So hopefully he can return for me. And the next couple of fixtures against Crystal Palace and Wolves aren't that bad. The only places that I'm not happy with my team is I don't like that Dibbling is my 5th midfielder. I'd like to get Dibbling upgraded somehow, but doing that is very tricky without selling one of the premiums. And I also don't really like my overall defense. Like, Gabriel and Nuri are great. Davis is fine as a 4th or 5th defender. And you could argue the same for Van den Berg, but I don't like having Van den Berg and Davis when Lewis is supposed to be my 3rd defender, right? He's supposed to start for me every week. And it's only one game that he's been benched, right? Apart from the Arsenal game. He's got very good minutes. It's not just the minutes, though. It's the fixtures. And someone said to me, like, if you thought Lewis was going to be benched, like, why would you have brought him in? Like, why are you going to be... As soon as he gets benched, you shouldn't be worried. That was part of it kind of thing. And I do agree with that. But it's also coupled with the fact that the fixtures aren't very good at all. The only game that I wouldn't mind, really, from a fixtures perspective, starting him is these 2 here. But Chris Wood's in great form. And do you even know that he starts every game? Like, could that be the game that he doesn't even start? I'm questioning everything when it comes to Rico Lewis. But at the same time, I don't know if I have enough information right now in terms of a replacement. So the replacements that I would be looking at is a United defender or Lewis Hall. With the United defence, we've spoken about throughout this video, I just don't know who is going to start under Amorim and how good their minutes will be. Other than Matthias de Ligt and Martinez, I'd be very surprised if they don't start. But Mazraoui would be a great option for me, but I'm just not convinced that he starts every game for Amorim. And if he doesn't, well, then that's a waste of a transfer. De Ligt is great, but it uses up all of my remaining budget. And I spoke about that. I'd quite like the idea of doing Raul Jimenez to Welbeck at some point. I can't do that. And it might be that I go for João Pedro instead, but I don't want to use up that 0.2, which could be useful for me. How much is Welbeck? Is he still 5.9? So assuming there are no price changes, that might be a transfer I want to make next week, but I can't do that if I use the money. So if I'm not sure about Mazraoui and De Ligt uses up all my money, the only other move I could make is to bring in Lewis Hall. And so that is probably where I'm leaning at the moment if I were to make a defender transfer. The issue is Lewis Hall against Forest away that much better than Lewis against Brighton if Lewis starts, which is the big issue? No. Is he even that much better than Vandenberg against Bournemouth at home? Probably, but Chris Wood's in such great form, I'm not really expecting a clean sheet for him. So I am tempted to just... I don't think my team looks great this week, but I did tweet that and everyone was like, what do you mean your team doesn't look good? It looks great. I don't like it. Fabianski's terrible. West Ham are rubbish. I don't know if Lewis will start. I've got a clash between Gabriel and Palmer. Rodgers is playing Liverpool away. As good as Rodgers has been, it's not ideal. And then I've got no Spurs and I've got no Man United against Ipswich and Leicester at home. So for me, the team doesn't look very good. But as I always say, when my team looks good on paper, I get red arrows. And when my team doesn't look very good, I get green arrows. So I don't think it's a huge issue that it's a slightly suboptimal team this week. I might just roll the transfer because it might be that next week I want to upgrade a player that needs that funds that I would get from doing, like, let's say, for example, I do Lewis to Hull, which would give me 0.7 million. That would give me enough to upgrade Dibbling to a 5.2 player. Ahmad's 4.9. Like, I might need that money. I might go, do you know what? Ahmad under Amarim, we think he's going to start. I'm going to go for it. I might need that money, and I just don't know. But then I might not, right? It might be that next week I sell Haaland, in which case I can go out there and get Gvardiol for Lewis or something like that. So I almost feel like just delaying the transfer might be wise. We spoke about in one of the previous sections, combination transfers. Having the two transfers just allows me to make those combinations. But, and this is the big but, big but, I don't know if Lewis starts. Do I just play Vandenberg, who's not great, but he's playing at home, and just say Vandenberg's probably more likely to start than Lewis? Do I play Leif Davis for the attacking threat? I don't know. I'd love to know what you do with this team in this situation. 1 free transfer, 0.2 in the bank. I'm probably 65% likely to roll and 35% likely to sell Lewis. I just think the Man United defence I'm slightly worried about. I don't want to get Delict because it uses all of my money. And then Lewis Hall, I just don't think is a massive upgrade for this week. So there we go. That's the team. Let me know what you think and let me know what your plans are as well. So guys, there we have it. That is the Game Week 11 deadline decisions. Hopefully that has been helpful for you. And if it has, please do remember to smash that like button. It really does support the channel. And if you're not yet subscribed, please do consider doing so as well. Until next time, which will be the deadline stream tomorrow. Remember, it's a later deadline, so we'll be starting at 11:30 UK time. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.